While sweeping the sidewalk, she found an abandoned baby crying in a trash bin. At 5 a.m., while the city still slept, Carla Rodriguez swept the sidewalks with the invisible efficiency of someone society had forgotten. At 20, with her long black hair tucked under a worn cap and her green eyes focused downward, she'd learned to make herself unseen. Street cleaning wasn't glamorous, but it kept food on the table and medicine for her sick mother. That morning, her routine shattered with a sound that shouldn't exist, a baby's cry coming from inside a dumpster. What she found would change 3 lives forever. An abandoned newborn, a prosecutor named Emiliano who witnessed her rescue, and herself, discovering that sometimes the most invisible people become exactly who someone needs them to be. In a world that measured worth by wealth, Carla was about to prove that love doesn't require a trust fund, and that the most profound transformations happen when ordinary people choose extraordinary compassion. The pre-dawn silence wrapped around the empty streets like a protective blanket. Carla pulled her worn jacket tighter against the morning chill, her long black hair tucked under a faded cap. At 20, she had already learned to make herself invisible, head down, earphones in, sweeping the sidewalks while the world still slept. The city's forgotten corners held secrets she never wanted to discover. Her green eyes focused on the rhythmic motion of the broom, each stroke a meditation that kept the judgmental stares and whispered comments at bay. Street cleaning wasn't glamorous work, but it was hers. It put food on the table and kept her mother's medications coming. The morning mist clung to her skin like silk, carrying the promise of stories yet untold. She approached the row of trash bins on Maple Street, the same route she'd walked for 8 months. The routine was comforting, predictable, until today. A sound that shouldn't exist in a world of silence shattered everything. A cry, soft, desperate, impossibly fragile. Carla stopped mid-sweep, her heart hammering against her ribs. She pulled out one earbud, straining to listen. There it was again, a baby's cry, muffled but unmistakable, coming from the large dumpster to her left. "No, it can't be," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her hands shook as she approached the bin. The crying grew louder, more urgent. With a deep breath, she lifted the heavy lid. Inside, wrapped in a dirty towel, a newborn baby looked up at her with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of abandonment. Carla's breath caught in her throat. The infant couldn't be more than a few days old, its tiny fists waving helplessly in the cold morning air. "Oh, sweet baby," she murmured, immediately reaching down to lift the child. "How could someone—" The moment she cradled the baby against her chest, something shifted in the universe around her. This wasn't just another morning, another shift, another invisible day in her invisible life. The baby's warmth seeped through her jacket, melting walls she didn't even know she'd built. "Shh, little one," she cooed, her natural instincts taking over. "You're safe now, I've got you." But even as she spoke the words, Carla knew her life had just taken a turn she wasn't prepared for. What was she supposed to do? Call the police? Social services? Her mind raced through possibilities, each one seeming inadequate. The sound of approaching footsteps made her freeze. Someone was coming, and she wasn't ready to explain what couldn't be explained. A tall figure emerged from the morning shadows, walking briskly down the sidewalk. Carla clutched the baby closer, her heart pounding. The man was well-dressed, carrying a briefcase, clearly heading to some important morning meeting. He slowed as he noticed her unusual posture, her protective stance. "Is everything all right?" His voice was gentle, concerned, not the tone she was used to hearing from strangers. Carla looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. Dark, intelligent, kind. This wasn't how these encounters usually went. I found—" she stammered, then gestured helplessly toward the dumpster. The man, Emiliano, though she didn't know his name yet, stepped closer. When he saw what she was holding, His expression transformed from curiosity to shock to something deeper. "Dear God," he breathed. "Is that a baby?" Carla whispered. "Someone threw away a baby." The words hung in the air between them, creating an invisible bond that neither fully understood yet. But Carla had no idea that the man standing before her would become the most important person in both their lives. Emiliano's mind raced as he stared at the impossible scene before him. In his 3 years as a prosecutor, he'd seen abandonment cases, but never like this. Never with someone who cared enough to hold the child like it was precious. "We need to call the authorities," he said softly, pulling out his phone. Carla's grip tightened on the baby, her protective instincts flaring. "Wait!" she whispered, her green eyes flashing with fierce determination. "What happens then? Foster care? The system?" Emiliano paused, his finger hovering over the emergency number. Something in her voice made him reconsider the standard protocol he'd followed 100 times before. "What's your name?" he asked instead. "Carla." She rocked the baby gently, its crying softening to small whimpers. "And I know what you're thinking. Just another street cleaner who found something that isn't her business." The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light on her long black hair like a halo she'd never believed she deserved. "Actually," Emiliano said quietly, "I was thinking you might be the first person who's truly cared about this child." The words hung between them, unexpected and raw. Carla looked up, searching his face for the judgment she'd learned to expect. Instead, she found something that made her breath catch. "I'm Emiliano. I work for the DA's office." He crouched down to her level, his expensive suit forgotten on the dirty sidewalk. "And right now, I'm not thinking like a prosecutor. I'm thinking like someone who just witnessed something extraordinary." The baby opened its eyes, looking directly at Carla as if recognizing its savior. "She's so small," Carla murmured, instinctively knowing the child was a girl. "How could anyone—" "Some people aren't ready for the responsibility," Emiliano said carefully. "But you didn't hesitate." "I couldn't leave her." Carla's voice broke slightly. "I know what it feels like to be invisible, to be thrown away. I won't let that happen to her." The vulnerability in her admission hit Emiliano like a physical blow. This wasn't just about finding a baby. This was about recognition, about seeing worth where others saw none. In that moment, the space between them hummed with understanding neither had expected. "There's a protocol," he said slowly, "but there's also discretion. If you're willing to be part of this, to help me make sure she's truly safe, we can do this right." Carla's eyes widened. "You mean—" I believe some people come into our lives for a reason." Emiliano stood, extending his hand to help her up. "And I have a feeling you're going to fight for her like no one else would." As their hands touched, both felt something shift, a connection that had nothing to do with the baby and everything to do with recognizing kindred spirits. But that morning, as Emiliano watched Carla rise with the child still pressed protectively against her heart, he couldn't shake the feeling that this case would change everything he thought he knew about justice. The hospital's fluorescent lights felt harsh after the gentle morning sun. Carla sat in the waiting room, her hands still trembling from the adrenaline of the past hour. The baby, now cleaned and examined, slept peacefully in the bassinet beside her. "The doctor says she's healthy," Emiliano said, settling into the plastic chair next to her. "Maybe 3 days old, no signs of distress beyond being cold and hungry." Carla's relief was so profound, it brought tears she'd been holding back. "Thank God," she whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand through the clear plastic. "I kept thinking, what if I was too late?" "You weren't." Emiliano's voice was firm, certain. "You were exactly where you needed to be." The social worker approached, Mrs. Patterson, a tired woman in her 50s who'd seen too many cases like this. Carla instinctively tensed. "Miss Rodriguez, we appreciate what you did, but from here we'll handle the placement process." The institutional coldness in her voice made Carla's skin crawl, reminding her of every system that had failed people like her. "What kind of placement?" Carla asked, her protective instincts flaring again. "Emergency foster care, then adoption proceedings if no family comes forward." Mrs. Patterson's tone suggested this was routine, unremarkable. Emiliano stepped forward, his prosecutor voice emerging for the first time that day. "Actually, there are some legal considerations we need to discuss first." Mrs. Patterson looked surprised. "Legal considerations?" "Miss Rodriguez was the one who found and rescued the child. Under state law, that gives her certain rights in the placement process." His words were carefully chosen, professional. Carla stared at him. "Rights?" "The right to be considered as a potential guardian if you're interested and qualified." His eyes met hers. "The right to ensure her best interests are truly being served." Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request. It was a promise wrapped in legal authority. "I want to try," Carla said suddenly, surprising even herself. "I want to give her what I never had, someone who sees her worth." Mrs. Patterson made notes, but Emiliano was watching Carla's face, seeing something that made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. As they left the hospital, Emiliano walked Carla to the bus stop. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. He was quiet for a long moment. "Because sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same. And today you showed me the difference." The baby stirred in the hospital behind them, and both felt an invisible thread pulling them back. But it wasn't just about the child anymore. But neither of them suspected that helping this abandoned baby would lead them to find something they'd both been searching for without knowing it. 3 days later, Carla stood outside the courthouse, her stomach churning with nerves. She'd borrowed her only decent dress, a simple blue one that made her green eyes stand out, and tied her long black hair back in a neat bun. "You look perfect," Emiliano said, approaching with a reassuring smile. "Ready for this?" The weight of what she was attempting hit her like a physical blow. "What if they laugh at me?" Carla whispered. "A street cleaner wanting to adopt a baby? I don't even have a real home, just a tiny apartment with my sick mother." "Hey!" Emiliano gently touched her arm. "You have something more valuable than money. You have a heart that doesn't walk away from someone in need." Oh! Inside the courthouse, Judge Martinez, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the paperwork with sharp eyes. Carla felt like she was being examined under a microscope. "Miss Rodriguez," the judge began, "this is highly unusual. You're 20 years old, single, working minimum wage. What makes you think you can provide for a child?" The familiar taste of inadequacy filled Carla's mouth, but something deeper, something fierce, rose to meet it. "Your Honor," Carla said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I can't give her a mansion or expensive clothes, but I can give her something she'll never get in the system, someone who will never, ever give up on her." The judge's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "And you, Mr. Ramirez, what's your role in this?" Emiliano straightened. "I'm here as a friend of the court, Your Honor, and as someone who's witnessed Miss Rodriguez's character firsthand." "The character?" Judge Martinez raised an eyebrow. "She found a baby in a dumpster, and her first thought wasn't about the inconvenience or the problems it might cause her. It was about the child's safety. That's not training, that's instinct." Carla's eyes widened. She hadn't expected such a passionate defense. In that moment, she felt something shift between them, a partnership that went beyond legal procedures. "The state's preliminary report shows you're living paycheck to paycheck," the judge continued. "Yes, ma'am. Carla's voice was quiet but firm. "But I know what it's like to go without. I know how to stretch a dollar, how to make love feel like abundance." The courtroom felt suspended in time as the judge considered her words. "I'm granting temporary guardianship for 60 days, Judge Martinez finally said. "With conditions. You'll have weekly check-ins with social services, and Mr. Ramirez will serve as court liaison." Carla's knees nearly buckled with relief. "Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you so much." Outside the courthouse, Emiliano found her crying on the steps. "Happy tears, I hope?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I can't believe this is real." She wiped her eyes. "But 60 days. What if I mess up?" "You won't." His certainty was unshakable. "And if you need help, you call me, day or night." As he handed her his personal card, their fingers brushed, and both felt a spark that had nothing to do with legal obligations. That evening, as Carla prepared the tiny nursery in her apartment, she had no idea that Emiliano was doing the same thing, preparing his heart for something he'd never expected to find. The first week with baby Sophia, the name Carla had whispered to her that first night, was a beautiful chaos. Carla's small apartment transformed into a world of bottles, diapers, and soft lullabies sung in the early morning hours. "How are you managing?" Emiliano asked during his visit, watching Carla expertly change Sophia's diaper with practiced ease. Her exhaustion was evident, but so was something else, a glow he'd never seen before. "I'm tired," Carla admitted, cradling Sophia against her shoulder. "But I've never been happier. Is that crazy?" "Not at all." Emiliano found himself mesmerized by the sight of them together. "You were meant for this." Carla's mother, Elena, emerged from her bedroom, moving slowly with her walker. The older woman's health was declining, but her eyes sparkled when she looked at the baby. "She's an angel," Elena said softly, "just like you were, mija." The 3 generations of women in that tiny apartment created a warmth that Emiliano had never experienced in his own childhood. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Emiliano said respectfully, "how are you feeling about all this?" Elena smiled. "This baby brought life back to our home. Carla, she's been taking care of everyone else her whole life. Now she has someone who needs her love, not just her sacrifice." The profound truth in those words hit Emiliano like lightning. Later, as Sophia napped, Carla made coffee for Emiliano, the good coffee she'd been saving for special occasions. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Why don't you have a family? You're successful, kind." Emiliano was quiet for a long moment. "I've been focused on my career. Thought I had time for everything else later. And now," he looked at her, really looked, taking in her gentle strength, the way she'd transformed from invisible to luminous in just 1 week. "Now I'm wondering if I've been looking for the wrong things in the wrong places." The air between them shimmered with possibility neither was quite ready to name. Sophia stirred, making soft baby sounds that drew both their attention. Carla moved to pick her up, but Emiliano gestured. "May I?" Watching him hold Sophia with such gentle care, Carla felt her heart do something dangerous and wonderful. But their peaceful moment shattered when Mrs. Patterson appeared at the door unannounced, clipboard in hand and disapproval in her eyes. "Surprise inspection, Miss Rodriguez. I hope you're prepared." The tension in the room was immediate and sharp. Carla's protective instincts flared as she saw the social worker's critical gaze sweep over their humble but love-filled home. What Mrs. Patterson saw as inadequate, Emiliano saw as sacred, and he was prepared to fight for it. Mrs. Patterson moved through the small apartment with clinical precision, making notes on her clipboard. Every cramped corner, every worn piece of furniture seemed to disappoint her further. "The living space is quite small," she observed coldly, measuring the nursery area Carla had created in the corner of her bedroom. Carla's hands trembled as she watched her world being dissected and judged. "It meets all safety requirements," Emiliano interjected firmly. "I've reviewed the housing standards myself." Mrs. Patterson barely glanced at him. "Safety isn't the only consideration, Mr. Ramirez. This child deserves optimal conditions." "Ojo, she deserves love," Carla said quietly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And she has that here." The social worker's skeptical expression felt like a slap across everything Carla had built in just 1 week. Sophia began to fuss, sensing the tension in the room. Instantly, Carla moved to comfort her, the baby settling immediately in her arms. "How are you managing financially with the additional expenses?" Mrs. Patterson continued her interrogation. I've been working extra shifts," Carla admitted. "My neighbor watches Sophia when I'm gone." "An unlicensed caretaker?" The disapproval was immediate. Emiliano stepped forward, his prosecutor instincts fully engaged. "Mrs. Rodriguez is a retired teacher with 40 years of childcare experience. She's Sophia's grandmother figure, not an unlicensed stranger." Elena appeared in the doorway, her walker tapping softly against the floor. Despite her illness, her dignity was unmistakable. "This baby is loved here," Elena said simply. "More than I've seen children loved in big houses with fancy things." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly, but her professional mask quickly returned. "I'll need to review the financial records and conduct additional interviews," she announced, heading toward the door. As the door closed behind her, the apartment felt hollow, as if joy itself had been vacuumed out. "She's going to recommend removal, isn't she?" Carla whispered, sinking into her chair with Sophia still in her arms. Emiliano knelt beside her chair, his voice gentle but determined. "Not if I have anything to say about it." "You can't fight the system forever," Carla said, tears threatening. "I'm nobody. Sophia deserves better than—" "Stop!" Emiliano's hand covered hers. "You're not nobody. You're the woman who saved a child's life. You're the woman who makes love feel like abundance." Indeed, the intensity in his eyes made Carla's breath catch. This wasn't just about Sophia anymore. "Emiliano," she whispered, feeling something shift in the space between them. He leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "I won't let them take her from you. I won't let them take either of you from me." But as Sophia slept peacefully in Carla's arms, none of them knew that Mrs. Patterson was already drafting the report that would change everything. The call came at dawn. Carla's phone buzzed insistently, pulling her from the few hours of sleep she'd managed, while Sophia dozed beside her. "Carla, it's Emiliano. I need you to listen carefully." His voice was tight with controlled urgency. "Patterson filed her report early. They're coming for Sophia today." The world tilted beneath Carla's feet as the words hit her like physical blows. "What do you mean, coming for her?" she whispered, instinctively pulling Sophia closer to her chest. "Emergency removal order. I'm fighting it, but they'll be there within the hour." His voice broke slightly. "I'm so sorry, Carla. I thought we had more time." The morning light filtering through her curtains suddenly felt like the end of everything beautiful she'd ever known. Carla looked down at Sophia's peaceful face, the tiny features she'd memorized over sleepless nights, the little hands that had learned to curl around her finger with complete trust. "I can't let them take her," she whispered, her voice fierce with maternal protection. "She's mine now. She chose me." "Carla, listen to me." Emiliano's voice was gentle but urgent. "If you run, if you resist, it'll only make things worse. But I have a plan." 20 minutes later, as Carla heard cars pulling up outside, she was dressed and ready. Sophia was in her best outfit, a tiny pink dress Carla had bought with her last spare dollars. The knock on the door echoed like thunder through the small apartment. Mrs. Patterson entered with 2 other officials, their faces professionally blank. "Miss Rodriguez, we're here to transfer Sophia to temporary state care pending further review." Please, Carla's voice broke as she held Sophia tighter. Give me more time. I can do better, I can... The decision has been made, Mrs. Patterson said, reaching for the baby. But Emiliano burst through the door at that exact moment, his lawyer briefcase in hand and fire in his eyes. Stop right there, he commanded, his prosecutor voice filling the small space. I have an emergency injunction from Judge Martinez. Mrs. Patterson froze. What kind of injunction? The kind that says you can't remove this child without a full hearing. Emiliano's smile was sharp as a blade. Which I've scheduled for this afternoon. The shock on everyone's faces was worth every favor Emiliano had called in to make this happen. This is highly irregular, Mrs. Patterson protested. So is removing a child from a loving home without due process, Emiliano countered smoothly. As the officials reluctantly left, Carla collapsed into her chair, Sophia still safe in her arms. How did you... she began. Emiliano knelt beside her, his hand covering both hers and Sophia's tiny head. Because some things are worth fighting the entire system for. And as their eyes met over Sophia's sleeping form, both realized they weren't just fighting for a baby anymore, they were fighting for a future neither had dared to imagine. The courtroom was packed that afternoon. Carla sat at the front table, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms, while Emiliano organized his papers with the precision of a man who'd staked everything on this moment. Judge Martinez entered, her expression unreadable. This is highly unusual, Mr. Ramirez. You've called for an emergency hearing to contest a standard welfare removal. Emiliano stood, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Your Honor, this isn't standard. This is about a young woman who has transformed not just her own life, but the life of an abandoned child, in ways that can't be measured by income brackets or square footage. Mrs. Patterson rose to object, but the judge held up her hand. I'd like to hear this, Counselor. Proceed. Emiliano turned to face the courtroom. 3 weeks ago, Carla Rodriguez was invisible. Society had written her off as just a street cleaner. But when she found Sophia, something extraordinary happened. She became exactly who that baby needed her to be. The courtroom was so quiet that Sophia's gentle breathing seemed to echo off the walls. Your Honor, Emiliano continued, I've visited their home daily. I've watched a 20-year-old woman transform a corner of her bedroom into a sanctuary of love. I've seen her sacrifice sleep, food, and her own comfort to ensure Sophia thrives. Carla's eyes filled with tears as she listened to him fight for them with such passion. Judge Martinez leaned forward, her attention completely focused. Mrs. Patterson, your report recommends removal based on financial inadequacy. But Mr. Ramirez, you're presenting something different entirely. I am, Your Honor. I'm presenting the truth that love doesn't require a trust fund. Emiliano's voice softened. And I'm asking this court to see what I've seen, that some bonds can't be broken by bureaucracy. The judge looked directly at Carla. Miss Rodriguez, stand please. Carla stood carefully, Sophia still cradled against her chest. Tell me, in your own words, what this child means to you. Carla's voice was steady, filled with the quiet strength that had carried her through every hardship. Your Honor, Sophia isn't just a baby I found. She's the reason I understand what love really means. She's taught me that I'm not invisible. I'm exactly who someone needed me to be. The emotion in her words resonated through every corner of the courtroom. And if I grant permanent custody, Judge Martinez asked, how will you handle the financial challenges? Emiliano stepped forward. Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to formally request to be considered as Sophia's co-guardian. The courtroom gasped. Carla turned to stare at him, her heart stopping. I love them both, Emiliano said simply, his eyes never leaving Carla's face. And I want to help them build the family they deserve. In that moment, surrounded by legal procedures and formal language, something sacred and simple bloomed between them. Judge Martinez smiled, the first real smile anyone had seen from her. "Custody granted, permanently, to both of you." As Sophia stirred and opened her eyes, looking up at the two people who would now be her parents, Carla whispered, "Welcome home, baby girl. Welcome to your real family." 6 months later, as Carla walked down the aisle in a simple white dress, Sophia in Emiliano's arms at the altar, she knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unexpected places, even in the bottom of a dumpster, where angels wait to be found. 2 years later, Sophia took her first steps in the garden of the modest house Emiliano and Carla had bought together. As the little girl tottered between her parents, laughing with pure joy, Carla marveled at how love had multiplied rather than divided among the three of them. "Remember when you thought you weren't enough?" Emiliano whispered, wrapping his arms around his wife as they watched their daughter discover dandelions. Carla leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of the family they'd built from impossibility. "I was wrong about so many things," she murmured. "I thought I was saving her. But she saved me. She saved us all." Sophia toddled over, offering them a crushed dandelion with the solemnity of someone presenting a precious gift. As they knelt to accept her offering, Carla felt the circle complete: the abandoned baby, the invisible woman, and the man who saw them both clearly had become something beautiful and unbreakable. What started in a moment of compassion had bloomed into the kind of love that proves miracles still happen on ordinary sidewalks, for people brave enough to open their hearts when it matters most. Sometimes the family you're meant to have finds you in the most unexpected places, even crying in a dumpster at dawn, waiting for someone who will never walk away. Have you ever found something precious where others saw only waste? Share your story in the comments. Every act of compassion creates ripples we may never see. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this story if it touched your heart.